Hello, good people, and welcome to the Higher Living Podcast. This is episode 7, and today we have the privilege of having in studio with us Dr. Jameel Desai. Dr. Jameel Desai is a maxillofacial surgeon. He is a friend of mine as well as a doctor as well. He's treated me in the past. And Jameel and I share a few passions, one of them being cars. So today is going to be a very exciting interview for me. I think that we have so much to discuss. Jameel is going to talk to us about his practice, about some trends in the medical profession, what he's seen in some of his patients, and how all of these things transcend into us living at a higher level. So Jameel, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Very excited to be here. I must admit I've done some television interviews in the past, but I'm super excited to be doing a podcast because I believe this is a next level. It's very cerebral, and just really honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks, man. Yeah, podcasting is interesting because podcasting now seems to have changed the way that people gather information around specific topics of interest to them. So I find that even myself have got a specific following in terms of podcasts that I listen to. And the purpose of listening to the podcast is really around obtaining motivation, obtaining answers in certain cases to certain topics that one's looking for, whether it be business, whether it be personal, or whether it be anything, in fact. And I find that it's such an amazing platform for people to air what's in the skull with the broader community, with the intent of just helping people to find their way and helping people to just find some direction in terms of how they can transcend their lives. So Jameel, in terms of your practice, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do and where your practice has evolved from, and how does the story of Dr. Jameel Desai start, and how do you get to where we are right now?
Okay, so a couple of questions in there. Let me just start by saying that I love my job. I hope that I'm one of many people that can honestly say that I look forward to coming to work on a Monday morning. And I think that for me has always been the key to success, and that is being able to wake up with a passion, being able to go to bed with a passion. So I'm a maxillofacial and oral surgeon, and it's a unique speciality because it sort of transcends the gap between both dentistry and medicine. So we would typically work in the oral cavity and do minor oral surgery, but it extends beyond that, where we actually start doing bigger surgeries pertaining to the face, the structure, the jaws, etc. We treat a myriad of conditions, pathologies, trauma, congenital deformities, and it's just a very, very exciting space to be in. We help to transcend, challenges that people have, and we honestly make a meaningful difference in the quality of life. Because when you look at yourself in the mirror, the picture that you see is so important to one's general well-being, and I'm happy to be a part of that. My journey started pretty much the same as everybody else's, Sean. I was a rubbish student. I was a terrible scholar, very playful. Studied, have a basic science degree in paleontology, believe it or not.
Okay.
So I traipsed all around South Africa, unearthing fossils, working at Makapansgat, Gladysville, Taung, all of these weird and wonderful places. And I must say I loved it. But the reality of it all was that when life really starts setting in and you take stock and control of it, and you realize, sometimes you need to do a little bit more if you're going to secure yourself for the future. And I'm speaking about financially. It was then that I decided that I needed to do a clinical degree, which I did at Wits University. And I became a dentist, and I hated every minute of it. Absolutely despised it. Constantly being bombarded with negative energy from people. They see you as a giver of pain, not as a healer. And I was just not in a happy place. And then I got exposed to the speciality of maxillofacial surgery. And the day I was exposed to it, it was actually in a lecture by a senior colleague, a guy known as Jeff Curry, Dr. Jeff Curry. And I was absolutely blown away. And it inspired me to new levels. And I tell you, he ignited something in me because I transformed myself as a student. I became very scholarly after that.
You really? He ignited the passion.
He ignited the passion. And it's been a long and arduous journey, but eventually, yes, I qualified as a specialist in 2006.
How long was the journey, from your perspective?
Gosh, Sean, if you exclude the preliminary degrees, which was a Bachelor of Science and an Honours degree, 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've been a professional student for 16 years, much to the chagrin of my parents, because they thought I was going to be an academic bum. But it's been a long journey.
Okay. And it's also testament to what it takes to become a specialist doctor, right? A specialist in your field. It's not something that you just acquire easily, and it should be difficult. And I'm sure quite a lot of that was, yes, you didn't side of it from a learning perspective, but quite a lot of it must have also been the practical side in terms of spending times at the government hospitals, putting in the hours, working like crazy hours around the clock in terms of being a locum and all of those sort of things. I'm sure that, it's not easy to get to where you're at.
Sean, I'm honored that you think so, but I'm going to give you a very, very straightforward answer, and this is what I believe this from the bottom of my heart, and that is, you can train a monkey to become a doctor. It's not about the degree of difficulty. I mean, I believe actuarial scientists have a far more rigorous academic program. I don't believe you need to be particularly gifted. I think the one standout about becoming a doctor and then going on to becoming a specialist is having a vision and a goal and being extremely disciplined. You've got to have staying power, and that's what it comes down to. Discipline, 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 because it's a long road, and many a time you feel like you want to toss the towel in, and it's just that little bit of reach into the bottom of your soul that will push you over the line. And that's what it comes down to. So many people out there have got the ability to reach greatness if they've just found this one quality, and that is grit. You need grit.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if I look at some of the feedback that I get regarding some of the content that we put out, I can see that a lot of people would struggle with just understanding what their passion is. And if you don't have a passion and you don't understand where it is you're going, it's very difficult to get there. So I found that in some people, it's just, and we've done a series on this, on perseverance. It's just persevering through the trial and error phase, because as you mentioned, we've all started in a similar place where you get into a specific degree or a specific job, only to find out that that's not for you. But that shouldn't then set you back. That is an opportunity to explore further and explore what does tick the boxes for you and what does eventually get you onto the right road. And 14 years later, you're in a situation where you're absolutely in love with what you do. But I think the challenge for a lot of people is that they lack the motivation and the perseverance to push through, so they stay in the same place because it's comfortable. And comfort is a terrible thing when you're trying to get ahead in life.
You're so right. I have got a very, very vivid recollection of a life-changing experience for me. And that was when I finally got to stand in the queue to register for the very first time to do a degree at Wits University, which was in 1988.
Sure.
All right. I had rubbish matric results. I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm honest about it. And I stood there registering for a BSc because it was the only thing I could do. Okay. I had been on a job, and I paid the price. And as I stood in that queue, moping and feeling all depressed and so on, there was an elderly gentleman standing behind me, but you could see with his grandson from the rural area. And he looked at me and he said to me, "This must be a very exciting time for you." And I said, "No, Baba, not really. I'm very disappointed in myself. I'm going to be studying a BSc." And what he said to me was so profound and resonated so deeply with me ever since. And he turned around and he said to me, "You should not be ungrateful. You are very privileged. You're going to be getting an education. This is not a prison sentence. You are not waiting in a line to go to prison.
Wow.
You are waiting in a line to go to university." And that was a life-defining moment for me. And ever since then, I've always changed my attitude and said, you know what, despite everything else, always look at how privileged one is, because there are always people worse off than yourself.
That's perspective, eh?
Absolutely.
And I was having this conversation the other day with a client, And we were just talking about the importance of perspective. And looking at, and I'm going to use a cliche here, in terms of the glass half full, but you just have to look at that and change. You have to look at the problems in your life and change the way you look at it. Look at it from a different angle. And there's always an opportunity to find a positive, especially in the negative. Because the negative sometimes is what gets people down. Earlier we were talking about anxiety and stress, which we'll get into a bit later. But anxiety and stress are a reality of today's circumstance, but I think that today's circumstances are also so much driven by negative stimuli. And we have to somehow tune out of that frequency and find the positive and find the light, because without the darkness there is no light. And what other option do we have? The option of being miserable is not an option, So it's a very interesting subject which we'll get into a bit later. But tell me, in terms of your current practice, what are the types of patients that you see, and where does the depth and the breadth span in terms of what Jameel Desai does? Obviously, it's also, you mentioned touching on some of the dentistry aspects, but it's also, I'm sure, down to trauma and that sort of thing.
Correct. I must say, as I've gotten older, I've sort of shied away from trauma and treating acute trauma. I was a trauma junkie in the early days. I used to do something called advanced trauma life support. I was an instructor for many years. That is training doctors how to manage patients in an acute trauma setting to save lives. But as I've gotten older, Sean, I've started to realize that time is a very precious commodity. But you get to a point in your life where you've almost paid your dues and allowed yourself the privilege of having that time. So I leave the trauma now for the younger bucks, and I focus my practice more on elective surgeries. So looking at cold cases, doing difficult reconstructions, that sort of thing. It just gives me a bit more of a family life, at this point in time, which is also extremely important. That's not to say that I don't enjoy doing it. I'm exposed to a myriad of different conditions in my practice. And as you and I were just busy talking about this off air a while ago, COVID has been a very interesting time for us. I have seen an upsurge in psychosomatic, psychosocial disorders. Okay, and the one in particular that I'm exposed to is something called temporomandibular dysfunction, which is a rather debilitating neuromuscular condition that essentially cripples patients with pain. Okay, and this is very, very strongly coupled to levels of stress and anxiety that people are going through in their lives, and it manifests in terms of facial pain, headaches, jaw clenching, jaw grinding, etc. And ultimately, apart from just the pain, they pay the price because the jaw joints mechanically start breaking down. Sure. And we actually wind up having to do surgical procedures to correct that for patients. And it's really my passion and what I honestly specialize in. And so my path has been very, very diverse in many ways in my career. In the earlier days, it was the adrenaline of trauma, and now it's the circumspection of being able to delve deeper into more intricate work.
And did you find that life took you on a path, or was it something that you were quite defined in terms of where you were going?
That's a very interesting question. I honestly have never really given it much thought. The one thing I can tell you is that I'm a very spiritual person, okay, and dare I say God-fearing person as well. And I've always believed in destiny to a certain extent. I have never deliberately set myself a path, but always just seemed to wind up on a path that seemed to work for me, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely.
So I didn't shape my career in a certain direction. I've just allowed it to go, and I've always just embraced it.
And been open to what the universe brings, if I can put it that way.
100%.
And it's always interesting, and this is something that fascinates me. In fact, I am so passionate about this. And in fact, I'm doing quite a lot of research about and reading on Taoism at the moment. And it's that whole concept of surrender to the universe and surrender to the flow. And you know, that's a buzzword now, the flow. Surrender to the flow. And when you surrender to the flow, you find yourself being more energized in the present. And the consequences of what you do in the present determines where the flow takes you. And what I like about that way of thinking is that it sort of brings us back to where we need to be, because often we're so consumed by either the future or the past that we are living there most of the time. And the present gets very little attention. In fact, the present is quite a painful experience for some people, which is maybe what some of your patients are going through around their stress and anxiety. And it's just the power of the present that I think unlocks real value. And also the power of surrender, because that's what it takes. I do what I can do now to the best of my ability, and I surrender. But it's so difficult because innately we are all control freaks. We all want to control, we all want to steer, we all want to guide. And as much as we want to surrender, we can't fully surrender. And I think that in itself is for me one of the higher tasks that I want to try and fulfill in my life. The ability to surrender completely. And on some days it's easier than others.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, the question I keep asking myself, and I ask people around me as well, and that is, are you living your best life right now? Okay? And if not, what can you do to achieve that goal? And I think part and parcel of it is to come to the understanding and the realization that I will be able to control what is in my control, but I will surrender to that which is not in my control. And I will accept it with dignity, and I will persevere and show grit to get through the difficult times. You know, and that for me is a mantra that I try and live by nowadays. And that is just to go with the flow, as you say.
Yeah. And you know, you've got to trust and believe that when things don't work out, there's a bigger reason for that. And I'm sure you've experienced in your practice and in your life, sometimes when negative situations arise, it leads you to somewhere beautiful. And we just have to believe and go with that, you know. But coming back to the point on COVID, are you of the opinion that the vaccines? I've heard this in the market that some of the symptoms that the vaccines have created has been anxiety, depression, and all of that. Do you think there could be a link, coupled to the stress that COVID brought with the hard lockdown and all of those changes that we had to make in our living conditions?
Sean, it's a very difficult question to answer honestly. I think whatever questions are being asked are being answered anecdotally. Okay, I don't think there's evidence there to refute or support those claims. There may well be some merit to that line of thinking. I honestly don't know. What I can tell you is that I believe that the vaccines, in a large part, has had an integral part to play in subduing and sort of fizzing out the virulent strain of COVID.
Sure.
This we've seen since time immemorial. Okay, from the invention of the smallpox vaccine, we saw that polio was virtually eradicated off the face of the planet until we had a group of anti-vaxxers crop up in the northern parts of Pakistan. And now we're starting to see a resurgence in polio, which was thought to be an extinct disease. So I believe that for all the negative publicity out there about the vaccines, and I have no doubt that there were complications to the vaccine. There are always casualties. Okay? But one has to be utilitarian in your approach to medicine. And that is, you've got to treat the greater number of people with the greater number of good.
Sure.
Okay. And along the way, yes, there will be a few unfortunate people that will fall prey to the side effects of anything.
Sure.
You know? But overall, has it been a good thing? Has it been positive? I personally believe it has been. I have been vaccinated myself, my family has, and I've encouraged everybody to do it. Okay. But at the same time, I also respect people's right to believe and their right to choose.
Absolutely. I mean, I've also been vaccinated, and I think that I also had the Delta variant of COVID, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. My entire family and I had it for 14 days. We struggled with it for months after that. It was a horrible, horrible experience. And I think when you go through an experience like that, it gives you a whole new respect for what these vaccines bring to the table. because I do suspect after that we might have had one of the later variants, but it was so mild we probably didn't even know we had it. So definitely. Jameel, what's your view in terms of alternative medicine, Eastern medicine, these alternative healing methods, especially for pain and those sort of treatments? Are you an advocate of it? Do you think it has a place? Is that a bit of an unfair question?
No, I feel very strongly about it, actually. I'm not ashamed to say that I believe very much in holistic medical care. Mm-hmm. Sean, when you look at ancient cultures, you look at our culture, the Indian culture, we have Ayurvedic medicine that dates back 2,000-3,000 years. You look at ancient Chinese remedies that have been around long before Western medicine ever was. Okay, and people weren't pegging off like flies. Mm. I believe there's a place for it. I utilize some of those practices in my daily practice as well. I believe in certain homeopathic products, if for nothing else, just to strike a chord with patients. Mm. Okay, and ultimately you must remember human beings are very suggestive. Okay, if I said to you that this will help you, and you firmly believe that it's going to help you, then it's going to help you. Provided there is no side effects and harm coming out of that, I don't see the harm in that. This is not to say that these products are all placebos. Mm. I utilize a lot of ashwagandha in my practice. I utilize a lot of magnesium glycinate in my practice because these are known to be potent muscle relaxants, anti-anxiolytics, etc. Ultimately, my goal is not to keep people pickled in pharmacology and to give them drugs on a long-term basis, because I believe everything has got a consequence and you pay the price for everything with your health. So yes, ethical medicine, excuse the term, but that's what they call it, ethical medicine has got a role to play, and we cannot discount that, and it works, but to what end? You cannot be on pain medication indefinitely. You will pay the price. Okay, you can't take anti-inflammatories indefinitely. You will get cardiac disorders, you will get gastrointestinal disorders, etc. Okay, and you sort of have a snowball effect. So you get a patient that comes in and says, I have painful joints, and so you give them an anti-inflammatory, and they start taking this, and then they develop an ulcer. And so you need to add a proton pump inhibitor to prohibit the effects of the anti-inflammatory. And then they start taking that chronically. And then they start developing vitamin B complex deficiencies. And so they start developing pins and needle sensations. And so you've got to keep adding a new drug to counteract the effects of the last one. Yes. Whereas you should have just said to the patient, listen, mate, you have got joint pain because your uric acid levels are high, you're consuming way too much red meat, you're not doing enough exercise. Change your lifestyle and then let's see.
Absolutely. And so much of it is lifestyle based. And I think, and I don't know if you find this with your patients as well, but with the stresses that we currently have and the hustle and bustle that we're all currently on, it's very difficult to maintain a healthy lifestyle. I also think that there's what we consume, the meat, the chicken, all of the above, they've all been bioengineered and bioaccelerated in certain ways. Genetically modified is the correct term. And I think it's so difficult to not only keep to organic food, but expensive. So, staying healthy is expensive. And with the price of everything nowadays, people are really struggling. I mean, what's the sort of advice that you give your patients around how to manage it?
So, two things come to mind when I hear you making that statement. And the first thing is you're 100% correct. Unhealthy food is cheap. Okay? And the harsh reality of it all is that we live in a very, very challenging environment and society with great disparity. And you find the most vulnerable of people can actually only afford to eat the junk. Okay, and so we have a huge problem with obesity that is starting to happen in South Africa. I mean, just look around you and you see it on a daily basis. And this is through no fault of people. It's just they are living with the means that they have. And for us that are a little bit more privileged, I find that it's becoming increasingly expensive to live in this bubble. All right? We've got a parallel universe in South Africa. You've got people that live life with all its pressures and challenges on a daily basis. And then you've got the privileged few that have managed to create a bubble for themselves. All right? So you've got private education, private health, private security. You're in this bubble. But the current economic environment, the way things are shaping out now, and I see this in my practice as well, is that the bubble is becoming more and more expensive to maintain. And somewhere along the line, something's got to give. Whether it's health, whether it's well-being, whether it's stress, it becomes increasingly more stressful to create means to support this bubble.
It's so true.
You know?
It's so true.
Disposable income is certainly on the decline. People that need urgent medical care, acute medical care, can't afford it, so they're forced to go to state hospitals, which are overburdened, undermanned.
You find a lot of people now also discarding like traditional medical aid and going to hospital plans just to save a couple of $1,000 every month, because they're sort of doing the equation of if I get sick and I go and see a GP, I can just self-medicate. I don't have to go and pay this insane amount for a medical aid. And I mean, if you're a family of 4, medical aid costs are significant.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that we see all the time. The slice is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, I read recently on one of the bulletins that were published. I think Discovery Health has had a shrinkage in their membership by 77,000 members.
Sure.
You know,
yeah,
which is enormous if you think about it.
It's huge. It's huge. But it's also an opportunity for these large medical aid companies to innovate, to think about how they change the model. But I mean, there's this blanket of NHI that's now, rearing its head. Do you think that would have an impact on your specific practice and the stuff that you do?
Look, one is always, weary of the fact that implementation of the NHI is going to have some sort of impact on private health care. What exactly the impact will be, I don't know. Is there a need for NHI? Absolutely. There has to be. We can't continue having 90% or 80% of our population getting substandard health care. I think the key here is how this plan is to be funded and managed. And I think most of the private healthcare practitioners that I'm in contact with are not opposed to a national health scheme, okay, but are vehemently opposed to the wrath of mismanagement that we've seen time over and time over again. And this is the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a challenge that we're seeing in so many public sector elements, if I can put it that way. And it's a challenge that I think we need to, honestly, I don't know how we'd overcome that challenge. And it's a separate conversation, but it's really something that is plaguing the private sector and plaguing the country. I mean, if we look at what's happening with the power situation, water shortages, basic utilities falling over, where do we go? The question I ask myself is, where does the next 10 years lead us?
Obviously, at the forefront of most people's minds would be immigration. Okay, I'm going to lie to you if I said to you I haven't thought about it. I'm sure everybody has. But I love Africa. I love Johannesburg. I think we've got the best weather in the world. Okay, I think we've got the best people in the world. I did a stint in the UK as a junior doctor. I despised it. I hated every minute of it. Africa runs very deep in my veins. And I think the one thing we as South Africans have, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but we are eternal optimists.
It's so true.
We're always looking towards the dawn of the next day. And I think for as long as we've got that, we've got a chance. Because one lives in hope and says, one day, just maybe one day, something's going to give. And some leader's going to put his hand up and say, I am the Messiah. I am who you've been waiting for. And I'm here. And maybe the masses will believe and follow the true Messiah of politics. Until then, we've had a whole lot of pariahs, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So that's what I live for. I live to see the day when South Africa wakes up to a new dawn, where you find people have got genuinely renewed hope and vigor. We need vigor. There is apathy. Everywhere you look around you is apathy. We have become an absolute nation of handouts. Right? We have lost all our dignity. We have lost our self-pride. You know, when you can start flinging litter out of your car and litter the streets and so on, you've got no self-respect left anymore. And we're in a very dark place at the moment. And this needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. The call for change is there, and like you say, there's challenges that we need to overcome from a leadership perspective. But what I also advise people to do is, immigration is one way to look at it. Expansion is another way to look at it. So one need not think, let me leave and start afresh somewhere else. I think I would advise people to think about it and say, how do I create sustainability for what I've got going on here? And explore how I can expand my footprint elsewhere. Whether that be if you're in a job, whether that be work and now remote working, whether it be, working on more consulting type basis where you're able to do one or more assignments, and those could be internationally based, which could open up doors. If you've got a business, registering and doing a feasibility for your business overseas and looking at how you expand overseas. I mean, from a medical profession, I think it would be slightly more complex because there's obviously the regulations and the education, the level of the education and the degree, your relevancy and all of that. But, Jameel, I must tell you that I've been blessed enough to know quite a few people in the medical profession, quite a few close friends, and a lot of them are diversifying, getting out of medicine, not primarily, but they're looking at medical solutions and they're looking at becoming entrepreneurs in the medical space. I met with a guy doesn't do justice. I met with a cardiologist, super specialist, who is a technocrat and has been pioneering medical technologies. And he showed us some of the technologies that we are busy looking at working together on, down to a facial scan that you literally pick up your smartphone, it scans your face, tells you your BP, tells you it even tells your blood alcohol level, and a whole lot of other metrics that you would now need equipment to typically do. So the technology is advancing so quickly. His vision is to have full VR consults in the next 3 years. And my question to him was, so if your son is now getting of 18, 19 years old, would you advise him to be a doctor? And he said no. He said, unless you're looking to become a super specialist, the technology and digital is disrupting so many industries, and medical industry is not being spared. But coming back to the point is there's so many angles to really look at how we diversify.
So I have the pleasure of and the privilege of being one of the core medical team members of the Gift of the Givers. And Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, who's the chairman and head of the Gift of the Givers, always says one thing, and this is his mantra to us. And he says, it doesn't matter which disaster zone you go into. People have been traumatized. Sometimes all people want is to feel a hand on them, a caring hand. So one of the things about, this fantastic leap in tech, and virtual this and virtual that, is that it will never substitute the feeling of care that one gets from an intimate relationship or interlude with somebody, a professional person, for example. And that is why in my own practice I now practice something called slow medicine, where I take time to do lengthy consultations, chat to my patients, get to know them, etc. Because a lot of the time the answer lies in what is being said, and not necessarily in what you're seeing. Okay.
And then coming back to what you said earlier about diagnosing the root of the issue, I guess that the tech can only do so much, but we have to also embrace that the tech is really getting so sophisticated. And I mean, from your perspective, are you looking at bringing in more technology type solutions into your practice? Are you embracing it, or are you looking at it and saying that, you've got the area that you play in, and the way that you culturally position your practice, and that's sort of how you're going to do it?
So, being a child of the 70s, initially one is always resistant to change. I mean, that's just part and parcel of the territory. But the one thing I've had to constantly teach myself is to embrace technology. I mean, I employ a lot of tech in my practice. We're constantly looking at innovating, because you have to. For all that is being said about tech, listen, tech has done a heck of a lot to improve the quality of service, the diagnostics, getting things right, because it's far more predictable and less prone to human error.
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, we do, for example, we do dental implants. We go through great lengths to digitally plan mimic the procedures, simulate the procedures on the computer before we actually even get close to the patient. And by doing this, you're aiming to succeed rather than aiming to fail. So tech has got a very, very valuable role to play, but I think the key is trying to marry the two. And that is to keep the human element, keep that intimacy, and also bring in the tech at the same time. It's very easy to become tech crazy and to lose that humanness when one is dealing with people, because ultimately I'm in the service industry, and service has always been about good PR.
Absolutely.
Good people skills.
It's actually so refreshing that you say that. I was thinking of mentioning that earlier, but I didn't want to insult you. But it's such an interesting way that it's the reality. It's an experience. Yes, the person's getting the procedure done, but it's the experience around the procedure that brings the person back, that refers your practice. I'm sure you guys are basically only operate by referrals. I doubt, do you do any active marketing or anything like that?
Very, very little. Look, we are constrained in terms of how much of marketing we can do by the Health Professions Council of South Africa. These days it's a little bit more lax. But ultimately we rely on word of mouth. We rely on good experience, user experience. I do good by Sean. Sean tells 10 of his closest buddies, and eventually somebody needs me and they go, Sean once mentioned this guy.
Yes.
I'm going to go to him. Building a rapport with referring practitioners, I rely heavily on my general practitioners to refer patients to me. And the only way you do that is by providing constantly good service and good work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can see the passion when we start talking about your practice and medicine. I can see the passion. But tell me now, on the other side, how does Dr. Jameel Desai balance off the work? What does Dr. Jameel Desai do sport-wise? You said you're a family man, you're a God-fearing man. Give us a bit of insight in terms of how you balance things off.
Look, I love the outdoors. Okay, ever since I was a little guy, I enjoyed going out and doing some fishing, a passion that I share with my son. I enjoy going out to nature walks, hiking, just general travel, experiencing different parts of the country, experiencing different cultures. This is very interesting to me. I read a lot less than I should, and that is because I'm just absolutely exhausted. But when I do get something decent to read, I do enjoy that too.
Okay.
I love movies.
Okay.
I love movies. I went to watch Top Gun Maverick the other day.
Okay.
I loved it. Okay.
Yes, I've heard it's brilliant.
So I'm an average guy. I pretty much do whatever I like doing. In your intro, you said that I'm a car fan. I like cars. I like the way they work. I like the tech that goes into them. I like the progress that they make from model to model, etc. I appreciate the nuances of the engineering feats that they accomplish. But I'm not a petrol head, if you know what I mean. So I'm not somebody that would look at every car in the street and go, "Oh wow, yes. I just like certain aspects of it,
And your favorite brand?
Am I allowed to say? But I have always been partial to Porsche.
Okay.
As a little kid, and I got my very first ride in a Porsche, it was just something that was wow.
Yeah, the 911.
This is something amazing. I love Porsches.
And the 911 is the quintessential sports car. Not supercar, but sports car. And I think if you had to think back of a sports car in your mind, that shape comes to mind.
It's got a pedigree, it's got a lineage, it's got a history, and the changes have been made subtly. It's a little step every 3 or 4 years. A little step.
Yes.
The DNA inherently is still the same, and I think that's what makes it so absolutely special for me.
It's about evolution, not revolution. And they've made some changes along the way, and it's interesting to see how they reverted back to what the classic shape was. Example I would give you is the change from the 993 to the 996 with the fried headlights, and then in the 997 back to the round light that adopted that typical Porsche shape again, and it was a complete hit again.
I don't know if Porsche aficionados are just conservative by nature, and have actually curtailed the company's willingness to go bold. I don't know. But I, for one, appreciate that. I appreciate the changes were subtle, but I appreciate the fact that you can always look at any 911 and instantaneously know that this is a 911. So I love Porsche.
For me, the thing about the 911 is the level of the engineering. And I think if you look at it from an engineering perspective, in my opinion, there's Porsche and then there's everybody else. Because you just find that, and that's why the value of these cars go through the roof the older they get. It's like the longer you have a Porsche, the better it gets, the better your investment gets. Very few cars are like that. I mean, if you look at the price of not even the special ones, you look at a Carrera S, Carrera GTS. Did you see the price of the new Carrera GTS? It is, I couldn't believe it when I saw the price of the new Carrera GTS. And it's just, there's two things. The one is the appreciation of the car, but the second thing is the appreciation of the market. And the market is just going to a place at the moment. I don't know what's driving it, but back in the day we used to have those M&M books. Remember that? Medium Magruder? Open the book, you had a book value, and then if you're looking for a car in that value, it sort of tied in. There was an alignment. But now it's whatever you want. It's really changed the way that people sell these cars, buy these cars, and the reality is, as South Africans, we pay premiums. We want a nice car, so we pay for that,
Which is really ironic when you consider the state of our roads. But that's what I said. South Africans are optimists.
Yes,
Joburgers are optimists. You have this exotic sports car, but in reality, you're very limited in terms of where you can drive it. And I've always said that this for me is a very painful situation, but that's cars for you. It sometimes doesn't make all that much sense, but it's a passion.
Yeah. So tell me, you said, how old is your son?
My son is 15. He actually turned 15 yesterday.
Oh,
he has the privilege of
birthday.
Not yesterday. 2 days ago. He's born on Mandela Day.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
So he shares a birthday with one of our great icons.
Wow. Okay. So put you in a situation here, because we are getting to the end of the show. So I want to put you in a situation. You're 15. Is he turned 15 or is he turned 16?
He's just turned 15.
So your 15-year-old son comes to you and says, "Dad, what are the 3 things that I need to do to be successful in life?" What would you tell him those 3 things are?
I can answer this quite easily because I've had this discussion with him on numerous occasions.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
And that is, stay true to yourself. Stay grounded. Stay true to yourself. Secondly, believe in yourself. Believe that you are special. Believe that you have what it takes. And thirdly, never lose sight of that. Develop grit, and you will overcome everything and any of life's adversities and challenges.
And when life's challenges appear, what is the one thing that you would tell your boy to do?
Embrace it and be patient, because after every suffering comes ease.
So true. So true. I love that. That is great. Jameel, I'm so disappointed that we're out of time, but we will definitely have a follow-up. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. It's been an absolute privilege to have you with us. To get into the mind of somebody like you and share that with our broader audience has really been special. So thank you so much.
Sean, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm very honored. You're an absolute gentleman, and I've gelled with you from the moment we've met. It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you, and I wish you every success as well.
Thank you so much, Jameel. Guys, that's our show for today. It's a cold day out there, so stay warm. But my friends, more than anything else, stay inspired.